Test scores for reading and math in America's teens hit its lowest level in decades this past year. In fact, scores declined across the board no matter the race, the class where they lived. But in math, there was an especially larger drop in the most vulnerable children, including Black, Native American, and low-income students. Joining us right now to discuss is Parents Defending Education's Erika Sanzi. Good morning, Erika. Thanks for joining us. We know these scores are based on standardized tests, and this was for 13-year-olds. This has gone down, Erika, every single year for the past 10 years, even before the pandemic. And this is leaving some educators to believe this goes much further than just closing the schools, than just COVID, but an actual change in the curriculum and what's being taught right now in our public schools. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so we see the decline really start around 2012. And so I would caution people from jumping on the narrative about how this is the pandemic. Certainly, basically, we're already on a pretty bad downslide, and then the pandemic sort of blew everything up. But again, we were seeing consistent drops since 2012. And while students that were the most successful definitely did also see a decline, the most alarming thing is that the students that were already at the bottom in terms of their student achievement, they took a massive tumble. I've been reading the commentary of some people out there who are sort of, education commentators and experts. And what I saw them, they described this as flashing red, disquieting, and bleak. So this is really, really bad. But again, for anyone that's been watching, it's not surprising. I think what is surprising is how quickly so much progress was erased. Yeah,
and I thought there was this interesting statistics that I read about with this huge decline in 8th graders enrolled in algebra. In fact, this was stunning to me. 34% in 2012 and just 24% now, which the Washington Post had an article about this that said, quote, equalize math education by placing fewer 8th graders into advanced math. What does that mean, and why is there a push to try and equalize math education by placing fewer 8th graders into advanced math?
So this is equity now. So those of us who thought equity was about making sure students had what they needed and had equal opportunity, now what we're seeing is a massive push for equal outcomes. And the only way you get equal outcomes is that you pull those accelerated learners down and you lower the bar. So while the number you stated is crazy, I just looked and saw that if you just look out west, the percentages of 8th graders in algebra dropped from 51% to 19%. So this, again, is a push. It is moving against excellence and against acceleration because they want equal outcomes. But what happens with that is that now you're not only not giving the high dose interventions to the kids who are struggling, you're pulling down your highest, sort of like most accelerated learners, which means that you've basically done a disservice to everybody.
So it's not even equal opportunity anymore. Now it's about equal outcome.
Equal outcomes.
In New Jersey public schools, let's talk about this. The number of students who identify as non-binary has jumped to more than 4,000%. From 16 students reportedly in the 2019-2020 school year to 675 this past year. What do you make in this jump in the number of so-called non-binary students? What's your thoughts on this?
I think this is coming from a lot of directions. So certainly the blame does not rest solely on the schools, though they are a major player. You've got students who spend, many hours a day on apps like Tumblr, and that is sort of like an ecosystem of just nonstop pressure to identify into one of these categories. And then the schools, again, are also, if you notice, if you're kind of just a plain old straight boring person is how they present it, right? Like, that's not cool and there's no celebration for you. But if you identify into one of these other categories, they're going to have parades and there's going to be posters and there's going to be banners. But another really alarming part of this is that as the schools continue to tell children how much privilege they have based on all of these different characteristics, and two of the categories where they tell students they have privilege is if they are heterosexual and or if they identify, with their actual biological sex. So I don't even know why they're talking about these things at all with kids. But because if you shame kids for the privilege they have, they begin to look for ways to shave off privilege points. Like can I identify into some marginalized group so I'm not the bad guy? And one of the only ways adolescents can do that is to identify into one of these sort of LGBTQ categories. And when we talk to people, to kids who've gone through this and then sort of come out the other side, they often cite that as one of the motivating factors for why they decided to change and identify as non-binary or as trans.
Director of Outreach for Parents Defending Education, Erika Sanzi, thanks for joining us this morning.
Great to
giving
see
us some
you.
insight on this. Great to see you as well. Have a great weekend.